Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all. Welcome to our May version of the Legislative Action Committee for Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Hopefully you're having something yummy for lunch or dinner. I'm Lisa Chapman. I'm the Director of Public Policy, and it's great to see everyone here today. Just admitting people from the waiting room, so give me a moment. So this is our mission. We want to support all of you and collaborate with everyone to increase housing access and our supply and decrease and end homelessness and support communities in a way that leaves no one behind. So that's our mission today. Oh, didn't change that slide. We have a fabulous speaker today, Terry LAC. She is solo today. Brittany wasn't able to join her, so she is joining us from the United Way, and she will tell you all about her and her organization and some fabulous videos that they put together. And then Eric will run us through the litany of federal happenings, and there's a lot, so he will walk us through that. I will give some brief updates on what's happening at the state level and a couple of MICA updates, and then we also want to have time to hear from you all and hear what's going on in your communities or even just what you're thinking and feeling. So we appreciate everyone being there, and I will turn it over to Terry.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to share our story today. I'm Terry LAC, the Director of Grants and Public Policy for the United Way of Greater Central Michigan. I want to take the next few minutes to really tell you about a topic that's close to my heart, and that, of course, is invisible homelessness, especially in our rural communities like we have here in mid-Michigan. I'm honored to share our community's journey with you, not only what we've accomplished, but how we've learned to see what others don't see. Just to share a little context, I was previously the executive director of United Way of Montcalm and Ionia counties for the past 9 years. In April, we announced our merger with United Way of Gratiot and Isabella counties, now as United Way of Greater Central Michigan. We brought our strengths together to serve our 4 rural counties in a more efficiently and effective way. And this, what I'm sharing with you today is just a little part of that. So if you want to go to the next slide, that'd be great, please. Actually, you just saw me. So there we go. That's a good one. I want to take it back to where it really began for me. It wasn't in a boardroom and it wasn't in any kind of a meeting. It was actually in a parking lot. If you want to go to, actually, you're perfect on the slides. Here's the thing about advocacy. We know that data doesn't change hearts. It's the stories that do. It's the sad story of that sad looking pup that makes us want to go adopt all the puppies, right? Most of us live in routine. We drive the same way to work. We pick up our kids using them same roads. We grocery shop in the same stores. And we start to believe that what we see is the full picture. But when you're in the work of convening and community change, you learn to notice the things that people are missing. You learn to look with different lenses. And that's where storytelling does, or that's what storytelling does. It trains people to see things differently. And that's exactly what started to happen in 2018. If you'll move to the next slide, please. The calls started small. A few employers started to reach out to the offices at United Way and our Community Action Agency. And they started saying, hey, people are sleeping in their cars in our parking lot. What should we do about that? Those were calls from employers. At first, we thought it was an isolated incident, but the calls kept coming and the employers started saying things like, there's families in those cars. At the same time, our homeless shelter was reporting a rise in bed nights. Our domestic violence shelter was full with kids. But strangely, our schools weren't seeing an increase in their McKinney-Vento numbers. That's the kids that are experiencing homelessness. Something just wasn't adding up. Our counties were reporting nearly 49% of ALICE, which is United Way's acronym for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. They're the hardworking people that just don't have enough financial means to endure a hardship like a medical bill or a job loss, an increase in rent. Well, because I drove between Montcalm and Ionia counties every single day, I started noticing more and more campers parked on our state land. It felt like a quiet shift, one that most people probably didn't see unless they were actually looking for it. Then we learned our homeless shelter had started out giving out tents, and that was a real red flag for us as a community. As a convener, United Way has the unique ability to sit on multiple tables with corporate partners, municipalities, economic development, human services, schools, and even our legislators. That gives us a bird's eye view of when problems are starting to begin. At that same time, our data from 211 was telling us that housing and shelter was the number one need and most often unmet need in our communities, and it still is. So our local housing collaborative executive team got together and started asking some questions like, what would we do if we had the perfect set of funding? What do we actually need to know about homelessness in our community? We realized we didn't understand the invisible forms of rural homelessness, especially for families and youth, and we needed better data and better stories. That's when we partnered with our schools to distribute a youth survey. We used 10 voluntary questions that students aging 12 to 24 could respond to. We were shocked that we received over 1,800 responses. And here's the number that stopped us in our tracks. 1/3 of those youth reported couch surfing. That's a massive number in a rural region. It's massive no matter where you're at. But in a rural region with no supports, that's huge. And it was also a number that wasn't being captured in our homeless counts. But now we had some stories and we had the beginning of a case for funding. If you could go to the next slide and play the video, that would be wonderful. Oh, sorry, back up one slide. Sorry about that. And our video series that we're working through, this little video is just a little glimpse of a commercial, you can say, that our homeless shelter put together for us. So if you click on that black square, it should come up with a play bar underneath it. Hopefully. Just hover on that black square. All right, well, we'll skip that. How about you play this video? Can anyone hear that?
No, no
Wanted to
audio.
create some type of media.
Thank you.
The homelessness video series was an idea that came about from one of our local homeless shelters. They wanted to create some type of media that would help educate the public on rural homelessness and dispel some of the myths and stigmas around homelessness. So they approached United Way to see if we could come up with funding to do that project. Throughout some community connections, our team was able to secure funding from a McKinney-Vento grant. McKinney-Vento is federal funding to make sure that students have equal access to education. And one of the things that that funding can be spent on is educational materials. The goal of this video was twofold. So it was to educate the public on the unique realities of rural homelessness and to help reduce the stigmas surrounding folks experiencing homelessness. And I believe we achieved that. When you are watching this series, you're hearing from folks who are meeting the needs in homelessness every day and how it's not an individual failure, but it's a systemic issue, and how there are multiple things that need to happen in order to solve homelessness. But it really starts with that safety net provided by our shelters and those who work in the housing industry. So this video series, I think, is a success because it combines so many different community partners who work in housing, who came together to talk about the unique needs of our community, how we can address that, and again, support folks experiencing homelessness versus labeling them as one thing or another.
So let me give you a little backstory on how we got to this video series. That survey that we did with the youth, it really told us that we had some big challenges that we had to figure out. In most districts, the McKinney-Vento liaisons were doing that job with the other 5 responsibilities that they were doing. Many of them didn't even know that they were the liaison or what a liaison really needed to do. So we found that the reporting in our school districts, and we have 13 districts in Montcalm and Ionia alone, and 7 in Gratiot and Isabella. And we found out that reporting was inconsistent. And if we don't have accurate data, how could we ever write for grants to try to help solve for these issues? And how could we advocate for additional resources? During the pandemic, we received additional McKinney-Vento funds that came into our community. So we did something that no one else in the state was doing. We used those funds to hire 2 community impact managers. Brittany Stoneman, in the video you just watched, is the Gratiot Isabella liaison or community impact manager that we hired. And then we had one in Montcalm and Ionia as well. Their job was really to train school liaisons so that they knew what they were supposed to be doing, build relationships with our nonprofits, help families to access services, and most importantly, create a culture for reporting. We wanted the schools to understand that their numbers weren't just numbers. They were the story that would get us services in the future. With the early youth data in hand, the strong school partnerships developed, we launched a regional housing study to dig deeper into what was really happening. We interviewed students, school staff, human service leaders, families, municipalities, pretty much anyone that would talk to us. And we talked to employers. Many of them said that they lacked housing for their employees, and that employees often left because their housing situations changed. We heard from many others that wanted to expand their businesses, but couldn't because they couldn't find any housing for new employees that they wanted to hire. Our goal was to create a story-based, community-rooted report, one that showed the full ecosystem of rural housing and homelessness and the cost of inaction. Then the pandemic hit and the housing study came to a screeching halt, but the human service sector and the nonprofits didn't stop. The leadership team from our housing collaborative kept meeting every single week, and we used that time to really ask hard questions and brainstorm big ideas. We kept coming back to this question: how do we build housing for youth and families when there's no funding? What can we do creatively with what we have? We finished the housing study, and last April, just in Montcalm and Ionia County alone, we were approximately 32,000 housing units short. Kent County, in comparison, was over 53,000 housing unit shorts. That push for Grand Rapids keeps coming into our county, making our invisible homelessness even worse. And more importantly, most of our homeless are working people. They just simply can't find a home. This past fall, we began working on this video series that Brittany was talking about in the video. We completed 8 different videos that educate for rural homelessness. What we found over and over is that even when we talked at the state level, we were honestly always questioned, are you sure there's people on the state land? And we know there's people on the state land. So we wanted to be able to get our story out a little better. And so through this video series, we use it at any single meeting that we can come to and share this video. And it talks really about what is homelessness in a rural community? Why does homelessness in a rural community look different than in an urban setting? How can we impact it? And what are our schools really doing about it? In addition to the video series and being able to educate people on what homelessness looks like in a rural community, where individuals aren't standing on street corners holding a sign like people often think homelessness looks like, we've made some real tangible progress. We've doubled the number of beds in our homeless shelter. We've created a better pipeline between the schools and community resources. We've taught people how to tell the right story to the right funders, which is really key. We have municipalities that are changing their zoning to allow for housing density. That in itself is a huge win that takes years and years to accomplish. Now, we haven't opened a family shelter, and we still desperately need one, but now developers are building housing of all types in our region. And many of them cite workforce housing as their motivation, thanks to our employer advocacy. If you want to see the whole video series, I really encourage it. It's long. It's broken up into 8 to 11-minute video segments, but I encourage you to take a peek at it. The link is dropped in the chat for you. So what I'm really going to leave you with is, in rural communities, you only get one, if you're lucky, one shelter, one domestic violence shelter, one food pantry, one school liaison. When people fall through the cracks, there's nowhere else to land. But if you can teach people to see invisible, you can tell better stories. If we look at our community through new lenses, we can make real change. Now, it hasn't been fast change, and it hasn't always been easy, but it's been meaningful and community driven, everybody at the table change. United Way's role is to convene, to listen, and to help make invisible issues visible through partnerships, policies, and stories. Thank you for the opportunity to let me share some of our stories today. And really, that's what I have for you. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Thanks, Terry. I just wanted to, there's a few people who came on after you started talking, so I just wanted to emphasize, and this is an amazing project. Oh, you're getting a lot of
Thanks.
comments in the chat, but you utilize the McKinney-Vento funding to help promote this video series, and it's a great way of storytelling and sharing your data and the meaning behind it and the impacts in a different way. And I think this is fantastic.
I think you have to look at things differently, and you have to be brave enough to answer, to brainstorm things that you can't solve, right? We can't solve this, and we didn't even know where to begin, but we were able to ask those questions and take the time needed and be patient. I mean, this has been a 6-year project. And I mean, just last year we were holding a housing conference, and I remember saying to my board of directors, United Way can't build houses. Like, we can't solve this problem. So what are we doing? And that was really pivotal for us, because that's a question that we've asked all along the way. What are we doing? And we have to remind ourselves that we're advocating for those that cannot say anything or that don't qualify for something. So how do we get creative in our leadership and try to think differently? And when you can use McKinney-Vento dollars for homeless education, this is a great way to get that word out to a lot of people. So our hope is really at a state level. We've seen changes since the pandemic. ALICE is now a standard acronym that the state uses,
Yep.
and it's now in grant funding, so that people that are above the poverty line but making less than $70,000 a year can still get help in different programs. And that's just a part of the work that we're doing that comes from this. And so it takes all of us to really be brave enough to ask questions.
Yes. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Terry. Really appreciate it. And hopefully you can stick around with us. And if people have questions in the chat, they can reach out to you. So
Absolutely.
thanks
Thank
again.
you, everyone.
Really appreciate you. Thank you. Great work. We have a lot to cover today. Eric does for the federal update. So I will turn it over to him now.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you again, Terry, for being with us and giving that great presentation with some wonderful information. You got a lot of love in the chat with people who agree with that. So let's get moving on. I wanted to give an update at the federal level, talking about some of the administrative things that we've talked about already, just giving you an update, and then also talking about the budget and what that looks like going forward for fiscal year 2026. So with respect to administrative actions, I just wanted to give an update with respect to the affirmatively furthering fair housing revisions that have taken place with respect to that interim final rule. So we did participate. We reported on this at the last meeting, but I just want to let you know that the National Fair Housing Alliance did circulate a sign-on letter that we joined in providing comments to HUD opposing this new interim rule, which is now entitled Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Revisions. 136 different signatories on it, and there were some national organizations and then 35 statewide organizations, including ours. So I just wanted to point out there is still there are things that are happening with respect to people trying to push back on and or otherwise provide feedback about these changes that are taking place administratively through HUD. Next slide, please. Just an update on some of the staff departures. We've talked about this. All of us have speculated about this for a few months now, but now it's becoming a little bit more of a reality. So I just wanted to offer what we know and certainly would like you to share anything that you may have heard as well. But the Office of Personnel Management at the federal level, as you know, offered deferred resignations for federal employees. They did that back in February, and the resignation basically was offering folks a buyout, saying, "Hey, we're going to give you 8 months' pay if you say that you'll hit the road." Well, that did have a response, and a large number of federal staffers took that offer, and then HUD went another step further, and they offered a second resignation offer back on March 31st, and they thought that there was a lot of feedback that there were a lot of employees who really wished they had taken that first offer. So, hey, can you offer it again? So that buyout, or the fork in the road, as it was called, required HUD employees to opt in by April 11th. Just want to give you a heads up. What we have seen at this point is that about 2,300 of HUD's 9,900 employees, just under a quarter of their workforce, have taken the deferred resignation offers, the first round and the second round combined. That's a lot of staff. About half of the HUD field office also has pursued the fork in the road offers, and that does include some key personnel that we're aware of. Next slide, please. All right, now there is another executive order that was issued. Some of you may have heard about it. It's called the Restoring Equality of Opportunity and Meritocracy. You might be able to guess what this is about, but in essence, it's saying, hey, this is just another way of trying to rid ourselves of any reference to equity and the DEI work and fairness, et cetera, that we've had for decades. And what it does eliminates the use of disparate impact liability and tells the Attorney General to repeal anything, any regulations for all federal agencies, including HUD, that derive from Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that actually takes into consideration the disparate impact liability. So I've got a note down at the bottom. I'll just remind people that when we talk about disparate impact, we're talking about a way of proving housing discrimination without actually having to show that discrimination was intentional. Okay, just to put that in simple terms, now we need to show that there was some intentionality with respect to the discrimination, rather than simply looking at what's happening that's discriminating against people that may or may not have been intentional, which then puts the burden of proof on the entity that's going to be investigating something. It really reduces the ability to enforce. It directs all federal agencies to deprioritize enforcement of statutes and regulations that do include disparate impact liability. And it does require the Attorney General and the heads of all the federal agencies to determine whether or not any federal authorities preempt state laws or state regulations or practices that impose disparate impact liability, or whether or not they have constitutional infirmities that warrant federal action. Long story short, this just really waters down the effectiveness when we think in terms of the Civil Rights Act of 1968 and the Fair Housing Act, that will reduce the ability of enforcement with respect to discrimination. Next slide, please. So now let's talk about the really ugly stuff. That's the federal budget for the upcoming year. We have talked about this the last couple of months about what we have heard with respect to what kind of numbers might be coming out of the executive branch for the upcoming budget. Well, there was something that was released by the White House, and surprise, no surprise, the Trump administration is proposing massive cuts to domestic spending, and it would be the lowest level of the modern era, which is post World War II. So that's going to be taking us back quite a bit when you think in terms of the numbers that we are at now versus what we're looking at with this budget cut. It's 1.7 trillion in discretionary funding. Just so you know, last year, the current 2025 budget is 1.606 trillion. So overall, it's an increase in discretionary funding. But here is the smoke and mirrors, that it would dramatically cut programs and the role of government in the programming that is funded. The Defense Department would see a 13% increase to more than $1 trillion. So out of that 1.7, again, it's an increase, but that increase is going to be going to the Defense Department. It's not going to be going to the non-defense agencies. So that means that there will be a slash for all non-defense agencies by about 22%. That includes some cuts to HUD that would really take away some of the most important tools that we have when we think about affordable housing and homelessness and community development funding. Next slide, please. Thank you. So drilling down a little bit, I wanted to just talk in terms of some of the elements within the HUD budget that would be impacted if indeed this is pursued by Congress. You know, the House and the Senate also have to buy into this. This is a proposal from the executive branch, but just keep this in mind. This is what we're looking at with respect to cuts of about $27 billion from HUD's rental assistance programs. That's the housing choice vouchers, public housing, project-based rental assistance, etc. And it would also be changing how these programs operate. It would be merging programs, and it would be moving, in some cases, monies into block grants. So it would combine these that I have here in this slide, moving them into one program, which would be called State Rental Assistance Block Grants. And so this proposal would be cutting HUD rental assistance by about 43%. 43%. And it would be adding a 2-year time limit on receiving rental assistance for, quote, able-bodied adults, unquote, which of course we know that would be yet to be defined and sometimes is interpreted differently by different people within different structures within the federal and state government. And it encourages states to provide funding to share in the responsibility. So it's saying not only they're cutting the funding, they're going to be pushing the burden on states to backfill that to make sure that there's adequate funding, because Lord knows states aren't doing their share and the federal government feels that they should. So that is going to be a choice that has to be made then at the state level to think in terms of whether or not there are funds and a willingness to backfill that $27 billion in cuts. Next slide, please. So the homelessness assistance grants, which so many COCs around the state rely on, would be cut by about $500 million. We'll be consolidating the COC program and the Housing Opportunities with Persons with AIDS program into the Emergency Solutions Grants program. And under the proposal, again, people experiencing or at risk of homelessness would only be able to receive assistance for 2 years. Next slide, please. Other things to be looking at are the elimination of things such as the Community Development Block Grant Program, the Home Investment Partnership Program, the Indian Housing Block and Native Hawaiian Housing Block Grant Program, pushing them together into a single entity that would be formula-based, and then the Family Self-Sufficiency Program would be gone. So just wanted to note that the proposal argues that these programs are duplicative in purpose, and such programs should be better left to state and local governments to figure out. Again, passing that responsibility down the line. Next slide, please. Okay, so it would also include reduced funding for HUD's Healthy Homes and Lead Hazards program, eliminating the pathways to removing obstacles to housing program. It would eliminate the Fair Housing Initiatives program. And I just want to note that in the proposal, it does assert that the request would maintain, quote unquote, maintain support for the Fair Housing Assistance Program to fund state and local enforcement agencies processing fair housing complaints under the Fair Housing Act. So this is interesting because it states that there would be funding maintained for that purpose, but they have reduced the enforceability with the administrative action that I talked about before. Next slide,
Eric,
please. Yeah, I'm
there's a
sorry.
question in the chat about the 2-year clock on persons receiving funding. And I don't know if the details are hammered out yet, but
Yeah,
it might
no,
be an individual thing
and that's a
rather
good
than,
question.
yeah.
Yeah, there's no detail on it at this point. Again, and this is a proposal that comes from the executive branch. The details get hammered out when the budget is actually formalized. But that's an excellent question to be considering. And what does that mean? Um, is that at any point in the past? Is it just going forward? Who makes the determinations about those things, et cetera, et cetera? So maybe a little premature to put that out there, but I just want everybody to know that that's what's being proposed by the executive branch. Next slide, please. So let's think in terms of beyond HUD. There are also other programs that do provide services that affect the persons that we're serving. So USDA would have some major cuts. They would have an increase of 74 million in the rental assistance program, but it would also be slashing 10 times that much from the rural development program. And the administration is arguing too duplicative, too small to have macroeconomic impacts, costly to deliver, et cetera, et cetera. So making the case for the elimination of those funds. Next slide, please. LIHEAP, all of us probably heard of this. If you haven't, that's the elimination of low-income heating and energy assistance program, which has been cut already through DOGE, but this is just suggesting that it would not be included in next year's budget either. Next slide, please. Okay, can we go back a second? I want to just point out an interesting argument that's made in the proposed budget resolution. It's unnecessary because states have policies preventing utility disconnections for low-income households. So that would be the rationale for eliminating LIHEAP funding because states have laws on the books that don't allow you to shut people off. So in essence, we don't need to provide any funding to help support it because, hey, they can just keep their connection going because state law provides for that. Some holes in some logic here in the real world. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Lisa. Can we go back again? Yeah, holes in the logic. I want to point one more thing out, and I should have just read the whole piece there. The budget will support low-income individuals. Instead of having cash to support them, you'll have energy dominance in this country, which will mean lower prices and American first economic platform. So those things will make it unnecessary to provide any kinds of supports to assist low-income households with respect to their energy assistance. I'm fascinated by that being a justification included in an executive budget. I'm sorry, I won't go back to the slide again, Lisa, if you move us forward. Thank you. So those are the highlights from the executive budget proposal. There's a lot more detail than that, and actually we'll drop a link in to the chat so that you can actually see a more detailed breakdown of the entire proposal. But I wanted to switch and talk a little bit about Congress because they have a very important role in this. Again, what the executive branch puts out is a proposal. It's just a request for what the president would like to see, but the House and the Senate have to duke things out. And typically, all three, the White House, the Senate, and the House, have not been in alignment. And the question is, will there be enough conversation taking place that's reality-based to talk about the impact of potential cuts, or will there be a slim majority that will push everything through that's consistent with what the president is recommending? So just to give you a kind of a read on things, that the House and the Senate went on a spring recess. And then they've come back, and well, before they had a budget resolution that kind of gives the framework for how much money each of the committees would be able to work with. But in that resolution, it's important to be thinking in terms of Medicaid and food assistance um, being on the chopping block. So they put this blueprint together before they left, and then they've come back, and now those committees are going to be getting together and taking that as guidance, that blueprint, that resolution that was passed, and they will start hammering out what the budget will look like. And just as a reminder, at the last meeting, I talked about reconciliation, that's the approach that's being pursued, which is a special procedure that allows a bill to pass the Senate with a simple majority of 51 instead of the supermajority of 60 votes, which historically is what the Senate has done. And they're a more conservative body. And the idea here with that is, well, let's make sure we really have this right. Let's make sure we've got 60 votes to be conservative and be very thoughtful and make sure we can get 60 votes to pass a budget. The House doesn't have that. They're just a simple majority. This reconciliation process, which is taking all of the budgets from all the departments and taking action at once. It's bringing them all together and you're taking action at once. That will trigger the reconciliation, as opposed to sometimes Congress will take on, a couple of budgets at a time and vote them through. So pieces of it as opposed to the entirety of it. But this is how they're approaching it now, is reconciliation, so they can get around that need for the 60 votes. Just FYI, that does put more pressure on us to be communicating to members of the House and Senate to slow down the train, if you will, and to make sure that there is some due diligence in checking numbers and making sure they understand what those impacts are. So something can be pushed through because the House and the Senate are both Republican-led. Theoretically, you don't need any bipartisan work here to have those bills passed. That's a real fear. Next slide, please. So again, talking about Medicaid and food assistance, this is just a little bit more detail for you to help put it into a context. In a previous meeting, we did walk through that a little bit more with respect to Medicaid in the state of Michigan. Now we're also talking about SNAP, just so you have a context. So Medicaid serves over 72 million low-income people around the country, and SNAP serves 42 million people around the country. But in Michigan, Medicaid covers 2.8 million residents. So that's about 1 in 4. About 25% of the folks who live in this state are receiving a Medicaid benefit. And then if you look at SNAP, it's 14%, or excuse me, 14.7, almost 15% of Michigan residents receive SNAP benefits. These are pretty significant numbers when we think in terms of people who are low income, who are eligible to receive these services, may have to forego all or a portion of the Medicaid resources that they are receiving. It's important for us to think about this because the state has put more and more into this over the years. There's been a significant increase in the Medicaid expenditure since 1991 for a number of reasons. But then the question will be, is there an ability and a political will to backfill this, if indeed this is going to be pushed on the shoulders of the state to continue with respect to Medicaid and put more into it? Is it even realistic to be thinking in terms of the dollar amounts? And I would suggest that it's not. That would not be a viable alternative. So these are some of the what we call the upstream needs when we're thinking about supporting people with expenditures that are not their housing, but are other expenditures in their budget, that if those elements are lost, those resources are lost, it puts them at greater risk of homelessness going forward. Next slide, please. So this gets back to where do you fit in? You can take action. You need to take some action. So we'll go through kind of our usual here. So go to the next slide. Just want to remind everybody that you can reach out to members of Congress. And as we've talked about over the last 6 months, maybe 9 months even, about some of the key elements that we feel need to be included in the upcoming budget and increases that are needed. I think it's important for us to really stand behind these elements in particular, knowing that there is potential um, uh, reduction and or elimination of some funding that currently we believe is essential for the work that we are doing, because it will not get better for the people we serve if these resources are gone. Again, the HUD budget was at 43% would be cut. That's a drastic amount that will definitely impact the ability to provide services and the tools available through the federal government. Next slide. So we do have a link that we're putting in for you to be able to just um, pop into a page, toss in your name and address, and then it will help you, it will facilitate that work. So you can contact your member of Congress. You don't have to look it up. You don't have to, draft an email separately. You don't, all that. This helps to facilitate that. So if you haven't gone there yet, please go to that link and take a look at that page, and please take action on it. This is just a reminder also about having your voice heard. And so whether or not you're reaching out and talking about specific elements within the budget, or if you're talking about concerns that you have with respect to the loss of programming or staffing at HUD, et cetera, email or call the offices. You can use social media to communicate these things as well, because those offices do monitor it. So don't think that if you're putting it on social media, it's just for your circle of friends. There are other people in elected office who monitor these things. Then the sharing of stories, and this just goes back to the importance of the messaging and storytelling, which Terry opened up with, and I think we know that this is the time we really need to step up with that as well, and share those compelling stories, because elected officials are going to need to hear this. Members of Congress, as well as our state legislators, need to hear these stories and how people are impacted in their districts. Next slide, please. So I wanted to ask folks about what kind of interaction they have had with members of Congress, and I'm specifically interested in hearing about any interactions you had with them during the spring recess. At the last meeting, we just reminded people that they were going to be on recess, and it would be an opportunity to try to catch them in the district, invite them to take a tour, to sit down for coffee or whatever it may be. But just want to know if anyone here did reach out to the member of Congress, whether it was while they were in district or if they reached out and communicated with them, and what kind of interaction and or response they have received from their elected officials. Anybody have anything they want to share?
I don't think so, Eric. So hopefully people, if you feel comfortable putting it in the chat, you can do that. But yeah, thank you, Eric. That was a lot of information to digest. You have the links in the chat for some of the take action elements and some of the background. Thank you, David.
Changed it
Yes.
all.
If you haven't yet, this is a good time to start. It's always appropriate. So yes, please do. And we have as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about ways you can do that. We're going to do some state updates. And I also wanted to just check and see. I saw that you can go to the next slide, Amy. Thank you. That Rep Devendorf was on. Are you still there, Rep Devendorf?
Yes, I'm here. I was just listening and continuing to learn.
No, I appreciate you. And did you want to say anything about what's going on the state level with appropriations or anything else? Any bills?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo everything that has been offered in the presentation thus far today about the seriousness of the federal cuts, how we need to be getting creative in response and figuring out how to ensure that our neighbors have the ability to meet their basic needs regardless. We're going to have to just come together. In addition to the Homeless Bill of Rights, which has already been sent to government operations to die, although we will keep working on that and also looking at ways to split that up to see if we could just establish standards and immunity for local governments so that they could respond with holistic best practices to our unhoused community members. In addition to that bill, we also are reintroducing the tenant right to counsel. And we are working with Representative Jimmy Wilson's office to reintroduce the bill to cover relocation fees, for the landlord to cover relocation fees. But we are really looking for any guidance and I'll continue to follow your priorities because I know that we can't afford to not make progress still on tenants' rights and on housing. Of course, I'll still be working with MISHTA. I had a meeting with the Department of Civil Rights the other day and talked to them about how they were impacted by federal cuts in housing, their work to enforce against housing discrimination. And they are finding ways to still meet that need by shifting that work to state funding sources, considering they do not have those federal dollars to count on. But we should expect more cuts from the federal government for so many of these programs. And this is at a time when I really wish we could be doing things like reinstituting rental assistance programs that we know both our landlords and our tenants really appreciated and needed, and frankly are going to need terribly within the next several months as we all get down to living off of the bare minimum. So I will stay in contact about all of those, probably through Lisa Chapman and Amy Stevenson, and send on that information as soon as they're introduced. And please continue to be in contact with me about what your priorities are going to be and what you feel is most feasible as you are talking to other legislators for this legislative session.
Thank you, Rep. Dievendorfer. Thank you for being such a great advocate for our unhoused population. We really appreciate your collaborative nature. That's just who you are. So thanks you so much. In addition to these bills and the ones that Rep. D talked about, we also have a couple that will be introduced: the eviction ceiling and expungement, the junk fee bill with Senator Bayer and other Senate partners. So we have a lot more tenant protections hopefully being introduced and hopefully enacted, but there's a lot of work ahead of us with all of these devastating cuts. So we can go to the next slide, and I want to remind you, yes, it's appropriations time. We have a legislative tracker that Eric just dropped in the link to, so you can check on what's been going on and see what's happening with some of the legislation and which committees, and if there's anything important. In terms of our appropriations for the budget process this year for October for the 25-26 budget, the Campaign to End Homelessness has advocated for additional funding in the Michigan Supportive Services Transformation Fund. As you may recall, this funding was appropriated in the past and $6 million in the fiscal year 23 budget. And early results show a 99% housing stability rate among the 470 households. It's just amazing. So this money would be transformational to those that really need the deep and broad services while they're in housing to help them stay in housing. So if you could weigh in on that, I think Eric popped a link in around the this particular ask. So you can take a moment to do that. That'd be greatly appreciated. It's, if you've never advocated, this is a good time to start because there's so much going on. in terms of threats to federal programs, the safety net that people really need and enjoy, Medicaid, LIHEAP, SNAP, you name it. So we really want to encourage you to continue to reach out. You can also do sign-on letters. We've been participating in that with some of our partners and coalitions in terms of the AmeriCorps cuts that have been just recently made known. So continue to reach out, support for Medicaid, and also follow trusted sources. I sign up for all these newsletters and read all the information. It keeps you up to date as well. Coming to our call on a monthly basis and others like it is really a way to kind of keep on top of things. So next slide, please. Just a few quick updates from us. Here's our policy priorities. I wanted to thank those of you that were able to join our advocacy day last month. We had about 140 folks who attended and we had 57 visits. Thank you to our partner and sponsor, the Michigan Network for Youth and Families. We really appreciate it. And also I would encourage you to diversify your funding streams, if at all possible, to look to philanthropy for some funding, your community foundations. And I also wanted to note that the Health Endowment Fund has two open areas of funding right now, community health impact and capacity building. So those are really great. Rep. Devendorf, you said you could do an update on AmeriCorps?
Yes.
Thank you.
So most of my background is in nonprofits, and which just really usually on the average day explains the empathy I have for all the work that's done on the ground. I also am co-chair of the governor's Legislative Service Commission caucus, which works in partnership with the governor's Community Service Commission. And as AmeriCorps has been cut, it has also cut her staff to her own commission as we were working on solutions to AmeriCorps being cut. But we have put in legislation for drafting based on conversations between myself and Representative Kathy Schmaltz, who is my Republican co-chair in the House for that Legislative Service Caucus. And the bills we've put in would create an MishiCorps program that would aim to fold AmeriCorps programming into it. Ideally, sooner than later, but we also acknowledge that bureaucracy and the legislative process takes time. And you may not be able to get your AmeriCorps Vistas back on the rolls before this summer, but we did put in an appropriations request to cover the cost of your AmeriCorps Vistas and also the work of the Governor's Community Service Commission. And really that it's a minimal appropriations ask. It's less than $25 million, which is of course a lot to all of us, and also so small compared to what we ask for build projects and all of these other things. We also put in a bill to try to change the law, and this is the least likely of all of them, but I wanted to make sure that you knew that it was hanging out there, to try to change the law so that our AmeriCorps Vistas who are now off of their assignments are eligible or can become eligible for unemployment. Now, that last one comes with a lot of only ifs, because we also know that we'll continue to expect cuts from the federal government. Those cuts will continue to be passed down. We have House Republicans already acknowledging that there will be preemptive cuts of all of our service programs. So I think that being able to extend unemployment benefits to a group that is not currently covered is a very slim chance, and also one that we may as well have a bill for. So those have not been introduced yet. They are being drafted as priorities, so they are being expedited, and the Speaker's office also knows that they are coming, and I've already been in conversations with them about starting to create and build the MishCorps program.
Oh, wonderful. This is all wonderful news. Thank you for sharing that with us. We really appreciate it. And Dana, you have a question? You have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Representative Stevendorf. This is Dana Watson with East Lansing City Council and also Am County Health Department. And I was just curious, I have three full-time team member colleagues along with the AmeriCorps program folks that were cut. And I was wondering if what you're proposing is a possible avenue for them to keep their full-time positions, the leads for the AmeriCorps members.
So to be blunt, that is certainly what I'm trying for. That is certainly my goal and aim is to make this happen as soon as we can so that you don't lose the folks that have already been on the job and are already integral to your work. But I also have to acknowledge that this depends on budget appropriations and the budget process, and it may be something that we don't get approved until the middle of the summer because of that. So the creation of the program and the funding of the program, they both have to happen in a complementary way, which I know you know from all of your good work in East Lansing. I will try to get that done as soon as possible. And frankly, what is going to help me is the pressure that my fellow legislators are already receiving about the fact that defunding AmeriCorps impacts their ability to function every day. So I do encourage the letter writing campaigns and the phone calls, and with an acknowledgement that there is something in the works that needs support, because with that kind of demand, we have a greater chance of them carving out the opportunity for us to fund this sooner than later, when the likelihood is we would have to wait till the middle of the summer.
Right. Wonderful. Well, thank you for the information. And we had an AmeriCorps and a Vista program, so we're also hurting. And I know, placing people across the state, you're all hurting. So we really appreciate that. And we will definitely amplify any asks for, people reaching out to their legislators to support both of those bills. Just a few quick updates. We have a free training coming up Monday, May 19th. It is the free one, and it is on the topic of engaging tenants and meaningful feedback. So I don't think it could be any more timely. It's from 1 to 2:30 on Monday, May 19th. So hopefully you'll be able to join us. And then next slide, please. We are hosting, it's in the midst of all of these negative things that we're hearing and the budget cuts and everything, we annually take the time to celebrate our champions across the state who are doing an amazing job, and all of you are. So we are getting together for breakfast on Tuesday, May 20th at the meeting space in Lansing to recognize champions in advocacy, data, community, homeless awareness month, and volunteerism categories. So we hope you can join us and take a couple hours out of your day. It is really, in my view, it is really so inspiring to hear all the great work that's happening. And it's a great networking opportunity too. So hopefully you can join us. I also wanted to let you know that we have a job opening for an associate director of policy and engagement with Micah. Hopefully Eric is popping the link in the chat, but it is posted until May 23rd on Indeed and LinkedIn. So if you want to do some great work in the area of advocacy and policy work, this may be right up your alley. Next slide, please. We have just a moment, but if people have anything that you want to share about what's going on in your community, successes, challenges, anything that you want to share, please feel free to unmute. Unfortunately, I don't think we have a way of virtually log into Breakfast of Champions. I think, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, we're not live streaming or anything.
We're gonna definitely try to live stream for folks to be able to join from wherever they are, especially if they know the champions and want to be part of that day, but they can't logistically. So check into our Facebook page especially, and we should be streaming from there.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, Lisa.
Hi, David.
So last month at the Detroit Rescue Mission, Mary Sheffield, who's city council chair currently and mayor hopeful, held a task force meeting for homelessness. And Hand was there. Detroit City Services offices was there, part of Detroit Housing and Revitalization. And you can tell how horribly they're trying to face the realities of what we're all dealing with, and especially in light of everything Eric brought up.
Sure.
But as you know, that earlier this year there was the tragedy where the two people were found dead in a garage, and so they're trying to implement some things. But some, we need to push, because there's a balance between the PR that goes on and the real solutions that go on.
Right.
So I'm hopeful that it's still an opportunity for some positive change.
Thank you. And I think I know they're looking at their coordinated entry system and responding to people who call in, and people, getting help to people, in real time. So yes. And something that we all need to do periodically, just to check our system. So thank you for that. Thank you. And thanks to all of you. I think we're going to just move on to our last couple slides and just say thank you for everyone. I know a lot of people have 1 o'clock calls and meetings, so thank you for joining us. And just keep a lookout for us via email and social media. There's a lot of ways to connect with us. Can go to the next slide, please. And we just thank you for your interest and your collaboration and partnership. And we will see you hopefully at BMCC in a couple weeks. If not, we'll see you around next month. Thanks, everyone, and take care.